You're listening to There Ought to Be a Law, the Center for Auto Safety podcast with Executive Director Michael Brooks, Chief Engineer Fred Perkins, and hosted by me, Anthony Simino. For over 50 years, the Center for Auto Safety has worked to make cars safer. Hey listeners, today is Wednesday, March 18th, 2026. Still don't have a flying car. Ooh, that should be my gaslight, my childhood. Nope, that's not how we're going to start things. We're going to start things by finding my notes. So this is surprising. This is out of AAA Newsroom. We'll start off with this. I'm going to quote from an article we're linking to. New research from the AAA Foundation for Traffic Safety published today finds that 15% of all police-reported crashes in 2023 involved a driver who fled the scene, the highest percentage recorded in any recent year. Is this just a declining moral attitude of the American public? Is this the new math? Is this school systems? No, really, why is this happening? We don't know. This is horrible. Because that becomes the bigger crime, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of factors here. I mean, we've seen, obviously, I think a lot of the upturn in, crashes generally in the last few years have kind of been placed on the pandemic and some of the driving behaviors that seem to grow around then. Aggressive driving, speeding, and, drunk driving all seem to increase during that period. But this is kind of like, not necessarily why the crash is happening, but why people are leaving the scene. And there seem to be a number of factors there, one of which is one I think we have all noticed would be that, a potentially drunk or driver using drugs hits another car, or a pedestrian flees because they don't want to get caught. Similarly, unlicensed drivers don't want to be cited for driving on a suspended license or without a license, and would leave the scene to avoid those consequences. Also, I think, something that plays a role here are the dramatic number of stolen vehicles, the increase in vehicle thefts over the past few years. I think would contribute to this somewhat, since, people driving stolen cars also, after a collision, don't want to be accountable and will flee the scene as well. So there are a lot of different reasons why this happened, but it seems, for the most part, it is, people who want to evade accountability for the consequences of their own behavior.
Chronic loudism. There's a lot of louts out there now. And I think there's a direct correlation, actually, with the number of empty nip bottles that we find by the side of the road now. There's a real plague of ignorance and just loudism. Sorry, I don't think there's any one cause.
Yeah.
But there's only one result, which is just louts, people who don't give a shit about other people, trying their best to evade responsibility.
If you had Fred using an arcane word on your bingo card, please mark it off. Loudism.
Well, it's a good, perfectly good word.
It's a great word. It's just not used enough. It's like grocery. Oh, it's different.
I think it's important. How do you combat louts, right? I mean, that's something we need to figure out here. If this is, an area that we obviously want to put a stop to and hold bad drivers, drunk drivers, unlicensed drivers accountable for breaking the law. How do you do that?
I don't think you can fight it unless you're fighting the whole bro culture thing.
But I think it's more than bro culture. I think it's not just as narrow as that. But I imagine with a lot of, and obviously in urban areas, you have got cameras everywhere, so license plates are recorded all over the place. I wish this kind of followed up and say how many of these people that fled the scene were eventually caught, because I imagine, again, it's like the cover up is worse than the crime. Like fleeing an accident is a much greater issue than causing an accident, because most times causing an accident, it's not a crime. It's an accident. That's what it is. But you leave that accident, now you're a criminal, right? I didn't go to law school.
Yeah. No, I mean, yes. I mean, you are leaving the scene of an accident, and that is a citable offense in every state. So there's no question about that. I mean, I'm interested in the countermeasures that are proposed here. Obviously, one of them is going to be, cameras with, automated license plate readers. There's some problematic camera systems there with their lack of cybersecurity, might be violating our privacy. Flock cameras certainly come to mind there, and so there's a little hesitance to deploy those everywhere. I know there are a lot of communities around the United States who are pushing back on the installation of those types of cameras, but there are also a lot of other companies that make things like the automated license plate readers you'll see mounted on police cars.
Right.
There are a lot of, but I mean, I guess the difference there, obviously, if a police car is on the scene of a hit and run and able to detect the plate, there's a much better chance of catching the driver. There were some other interesting, something I'd never really thought of was included in this article, which is that the automated crash notification feature that we've always been very supportive of, which, essentially, if a vehicle crashes and there is a person who is unresponsive, unable to exit the vehicle, unable to call the police, the vehicle itself essentially calls 911 and alerts emergency authorities to the crash. I mean, there are even more advanced systems there where they can give emergency personnel an insight into the crash forces and the type of crash was there so that they can be prepared to better assist, victims when they get on scene. But the other side of that system is that if it's, automatically reporting, any significant crash that occurs in the vehicle, then it is in some ways, kind of the tattletale on these folks who are fleeing the scene, particularly if it's their vehicle that is reporting the crash and then they leave the scene. The law enforcement would have a connection there that would allow them to figure out who it was and then track them down.
So this is not a smart ass question, and I know that's hard for listeners to understand. But what is actual the downside to that happening? Is it just the argument that my car's monitoring me and watching me and reporting on me? Is that or is there something else?
It's the
I'm
same
missing?
nonsense. Yeah, it's kind of the same nonsense we see in the area of alcohol impairment detection and in active intelligent speed assistance. There's a subset of our population that wants to push back on any type of technology in and outside of vehicles that can, track bad actors and make sure that they're held accountable. We talked about it last week in the context of someone claiming that, I believe it was the alcohol detection systems were somehow federal surveillance tools. The conspiracy theories around this stuff have gone a little bit mad. I mean, I think we need to kind of take a step back and look at the problems we're addressing here, which involve killing thousands of people and injuring, hundreds of thousands, possibly millions of human beings every year. And we have technologies that are relatively simple and effective and cheap enough to install in vehicles without incredibly raising the price of cars. Why aren't we going ahead and doing that and ignoring kind of this conspiratorial nonsense that these are somehow, surveillance systems? I really think that argument is stymieing, and I may even get to this a little more in the Gaslight this week involving NHTSA and alcohol detection. It's stymieing progress in this area and preventing, technology from coming into cars that can significantly cut the amount of fatal and injurious and just overall traffic accidents every year or crashes every year.
So I'm curious for listeners of if any of you are on that spectrum of saying I don't want to be tracked and whatnot, or if any of you are using Google Maps, Apple Maps, some sort of navigation system in your car, or if you have a mobile phone. I'm curious, and I'm not being a smartass about this because actually, so a couple of weeks ago, my wife and I are driving somewhere, and I didn't turn on directions to where we were going because it's a route we normally go all the time, and she's like, "Why don't you have this turned on?" And I'm like, two reasons. One, I don't need it. I know where I'm going. Two, I want to feel like a man again. Okay. I know how to drive. Like, I don't need this thing babysitting me. But then she made a good point saying, I leave it on. I know where I'm going. I leave it on in case there's traffic and it can route me around it. And I was like,
Yeah.
warning head. I was like, that doesn't make me feel like a man. A man sits in traffic. Yeah. And we get complaining and we yell. How do you think I get that spittle on the inside of the windshield?
Yeah, I mean, what's interesting to me is that there's so much pushback against the government stepping in and saying we need to save a lot of lives by putting this technology in cars, when the same people pushing back about on that are routinely using apps or other technology, or have technology already installed in their car that is tracking them and, essentially selling their data to other corporate entities and surveilling them. There's not a whole lot of outcry about that from the same camp that pushes back on any efforts by the government to save lives in the same manner.
Crazy. But I'm going to give Michael, I'm going to give you the Segway Award of the week because you mentioned alcohol detection. And that is our next story. We're going to talk about how NHTSA is, there's a report from NHTSA itself that got a little, the report to Congress, Advanced Impaired Driving Prevention Technology. I'm going to be honest, I tried getting through it and my brain stumped. But thankfully, there's an article from Road and Track titled Federal Regulators Tell Congress Advanced Impaired Driving Detection Technology Isn't Ready Yet. And I'm going to quote from this. Quoting, currently, detection technology around the legal limit continues to have an error rate that would be unacceptably high. While NHTSA has not made a final determination about the necessary levels of accuracy, even a 99.9% detection accuracy level could result in millions to tens of millions of instances each year where the technology would incorrectly prevent or limit drivers from operating their vehicles. So that's an interesting takeaway because I don't think they're necessarily wrong here. And I'm not against. Hold on, I know this is interesting. That's what I'm dying to hear your feedback because this stuff I think it has to work incredibly, incredibly well. Because think of that 99.9%. That's if it hits people. I want you to get to it. I'm dying to know. I want to know where I'm wrong because I'm thinking about it is if
you should know more just because we've already discussed this topic a number of times, right?
I know, but I have brain damage.
Okay.
Each week I read.
I want you to think Six Sigma.
Yeah, exactly. That's the thing is 99.9 is not enough.
No, that's actually inaccurate. And that is where I'm falling on my gas.
Okay.
This week.
Well, so before you jump it, so my thought reading that 99.9, so maybe that is the gaslight. That is okay. So that I agree. Okay, take it away, Mr.
So, and that's just positing 99.9% detection accuracy level as though that is the state of technology. We know directly from the mouth of Mr. Strasburger, who runs the DADS program, that the DADS system reached Six Sigma accuracy. So that is not 99.9. That is 99.999. Is it 9.7? Which is essentially 3 detection failures per million drives. So NHTSA is basically saying here, there's 227 billion driving trips that take place annually. Yeah, a 99.9% detection accuracy level is terrible, right? It's going to result in, like they say, millions and tens of millions of instances each year where the technology would incorrectly prevent or limit drivers from operating their vehicles. But the NHTSA is working with DADS, the industry is working with DADS, and the DADS folks are saying we've met Six Sigma criterion, right? We are at 99.9997% detection, which dramatically reduces that number. You're not talking about millions or tens of million instances per year where the technology would incorrectly prevent or limit drivers from operating their vehicles. And this is not even taking into account here the fact that you could use the technology multiple times in one instance where one might be a failure, or you might detect alcohol in one run of the system. The next one to check it might not, and the next one to check that might not, and that driver could be free to drive. So the way that the technology is implemented is also important here. NHTSA is essentially using a statistic that underrepresents the success that the dad system has displayed. And it's a saying, and I don't understand how they can say this, and this is where the gaslight really comes in. They say NHTSA is not aware of any technology that claims to achieve anywhere close to this level of accuracy in minimizing false positives and false negatives. And no such capabilities have been verified independently to date. Well, I could say that NHTSA probably hasn't expended resources verifying independently the claims that are being made by the dad's folks, but the dad's folks made it very clear last fall that they had achieved a Six Sigma level of accuracy, which is far better than what NHTSA is citing here. For that, I'm giving, NHTSA the gaslight of the week, because I think this is pretty clearly a political kind of whitewash of the alcohol detection technology area to try to pretend that the technology is not there yet, and we're just going to, wash our hands of this for another few years, and not try to force this into vehicles, which the auto industry is clearly not being very cooperative with. They haven't put these systems in e-cars so that NHTSA can actually test them and produce standards around them. And so NHTSA's hands are tied a little bit there because the industry is slow to adopt. But what NHTSA should be doing, instead of making false statements about the level of accuracy of the current technology, they should be doing a better job to verify the claims made by the folks who are producing this technology, and making this conversation a little broader, and having this conversation with manufacturers to push this technology into vehicles and to start saving lives on the road as soon as possible, versus kicking the can down the road to let some other administration make that determination.
Well, there's another level of bullshit involved in this argument. I'm reinforcing your gaslight, but I'm still going to be the winner, Anthony, just so you know.
Fred is waving his fist at me, threatening me to make sure he wins.
There's no reason why it's got to be all one way or the other. For example, you could put dads in, and dads are always right, by the way. So just based on my experience. But anyway, you could put the dads into a car today, and instead of completely immobilizing the car as a transitional installation, you could merely have the car start honking a horn and blinking its lights when it's detected that there's any alcohol present. This would be a great way of testing this whole false positive hypothesis to see if, in fact, it's unbearable. And it would give the police a chance to investigate something that is a likely hazardous situation. But there's no reason why it's got to be, we're going to jump off the cliff or not. There are transitional approaches that could allow earlier implementation of the technology without completely immobilizing the cars or taking a chance on immobilizing a whole city, as the alarmists would have you worry. So I think there's no reason not to do it today. There's a way you can manage the transition into the full capability. And at the same time, it would help encourage vehicle manufacturers to provide warning systems that allow other motorists and other road users to be alerted to and warned of hazardous behavior by an approaching vehicle. That alone would save a lot of lives. If you knew a drunk driver was coming, you'd get the hell out of the way. No reason why that couldn't be done today.
I like it. But Fred, your idea about having it flash its lights and honk horns, that just becomes a party bus all of a sudden. Like, that's the things people see that, like, yeah, drunks over here, let's go party. Woohoo.
Well, it might happen, but there are police in the world too, and hopefully they could do a better job if they had more information.
So, Michael, the question I have is how quickly, well, first of all, to refresh listeners' minds, not my mind, what exactly does DADS stand for?
I'm always going to have to look this one up. Let's see.
Never mind.
Well, as I can jump in.
Driver alcohol detection system for safety.
Thank you.
So it's a mass spectrometer. So it samples the environment either through touch or through air and looks for the existence of alcohol in the vicinity.
Okay, so I'm gonna ask a series of dumb questions. It's the lightning round. How quickly you're saying so false positive? So maybe the first time I sit down, it gives me says alcohol detected. Then it does a scan again. No alcohol. No alcohol. Do we have any idea how quickly these scans happen?
They work very quickly because they essentially have to. Consumers aren't going to accept a delay of 5, 10 seconds getting into their cars and waiting for this technology to kick in. So it works incredibly rapidly.
Okay.
And it has to.
So I'm in the driver's seat, sober as can be. Person next to me, drunk as a skunk in the passenger seat. Is this going to be a problem?
It shouldn't be, and they've tested that to make sure that it's it's going to detect less than 1 second. It's only going to detect the breath of the driver, and in the future they're actually trying to produce a tissue spectroscopy system, which basically you put your finger up to a light, an infrared light, and it's going to take a number of readings and quickly, and that would eliminate the potential for a passenger's breath to interfere. Although, from what I've seen, and from the I think Fred and I have both been to the auto show where we saw the dad's technology demoed, and they've always been pretty confident that the system is not going to confuse readings from a passenger or rear seat passengers, or if you have a bus full of drunks in the back, this is only going to detect the driver's alcohol level.
Last question. So I sit down again, stone sober, but I take out my hand sanitizer, wipe that on my hands. Contains a lot of alcohol. Where am I at?
I haven't read anything specific on that, but I've got to assume that there are, first of all, if it's sniffing your breath versus your hands, I'm assuming it's, I'm assuming that's been taken into account, particularly post-COVID when hand sanitizer really became a thing.
Hey, people at DADS, let me know. Write in, contact at autosafety.org. And while you're there, you can click on the red donate button. That's right, we will take money from DADS scan people, right? Right? Yeah. Autosafety.org. Click on donate. This section brought to you by Anheuser-Busch. If you're going to drive drunk, drink Budweiser. No, wait, no, don't ever. Don't do any of these things. Okay. Fred, are you ready for your gaslight, which you've threatened me that you've already won?
Oh, sure. I'm going back to my friends at Waymo and New York Times.
Boring.
There's another article this week in New York Times that talks about people being trapped in cars in Waymos of various types. And it illustrates really the important fact that self-driving cars introduce a whole new set of hazards to anybody who's using them. So the public perception is that humans are bad, computers are good. All we need to do is computerize everything and the world will be wonderful. But the fact is that they introduce a whole new range of failure modes and hazards that are simply not present in human-driven cars. And this article is all about that. People assaulting other cars or Waymos in San Francisco, trapping people in them, defacing the cars. That's only one of the many different kinds of hazards uniquely associated with the self-driving cars. But inside it, the reporter states, I'm quoting here, Waymo frequently emphasizes its safety compared with human drivers. Its data has shown a 90% decrease in serious injury or worse crashes for its cars compared with the average human driver over the same distance in cities where it operates. A different 2023 study showed that self-driving cars were twice as likely as human drivers to be involved in rear-end collisions, which Waymo disputed with its own data, close quote. So what's interesting is we're starting to see the urban myth of the safety of the Waymos deteriorate through the reporter apparently doing some homework, which is a good thing. But I also want to go back to the fundamental, which is that the studies quoted by Waymo or cited by Waymo in its analysis that says 90% fewer cars is actually wrong, it's faulty, and it's not what those studies say at all. So the studies that this relies on are based on data from 2022. What year is it now, Anthony?
Oh man, I didn't know there'd be a quiz.
Don't ask Anthony.
2026.
Yeah, no
That's a
idea.
tough one.
I got it.
Yeah.
Look at that.
Yeah.
So how many versions of software has Waymo gone through since 2022?
It's an ever evolving thing. We don't have release note. We just go with the flow, man.
Right. So the data they collected 2022 was based on a very limited operating area. It was based on cars that were restricted to low speed, and it was based on software that is no longer being used in the vehicle. So there's no basis to believe the statement by Waymo that it's 90% less than the study basis. But even going beyond that, the three studies, I'm quoting here from the studies, the first one says accidents involving advanced driving systems occur more frequently than human-driven vehicle accidents under dawn, dusk, or turning conditions, which is 5.25 and 1.98 times higher than the humans, respectively, close quote. That doesn't say it's 90% less, does it? It says it's 5 times more. The next study says the direction and significance of comparisons in the any property damage or injury outcome group are inconclusive due to difficulties in estimating and matching human benchmark. So that's the second study they cite. It basically says we don't know how to draw conclusions based on this. And then the third study they cite says that differences between human and vehicles ranging from 10 to 47% higher in San Francisco, 12 to 20% higher in Maricopa, and 7% lower to 34% higher in Los Angeles counties. This time of day adjustment in San Francisco, limited to this region due to data availability, resulted in adjusted crash rates 2% lower to 16% higher than adjusted and unadjusted rates, depending on the severity level, close quote. So the third study that they cite also doesn't say 90% less. It says probably higher, but we can't really tell because there's such a wide range of variability depending on how you look at the data. So Waymo, out of whole cloth, made up a number that says we're 90% better and propagated that number in their PR. By the way, nobody signed the report that Waymo published on his website.
That's
who knows where it came from?
That's a sign of quality.
Yeah, there must be engineers cringing somewhere. And that was picked up, of course, without acknowledgement by the New York Times that bypassed all the data, didn't bother to investigate the source. But the good news is now New York Times seems to be softening and is coming around to actually reading some of the reports and at least reading some comparative reports. So once again, I'm crediting Waymo with the absolutely best PR in the world and absolutely worst representation of the truth in their data, and giving, I guess, an assist to New York Times for not bothering to actually find out what the hell is going on when they publish their data. So there you go. There's my gaslight this week.
Pretty good. I mean, you're like a dog with a bone here, though. One week I want to see you move on and try something different. I mean, I don't disagree, mainly because I want to take this.
This is so good. I meet the Waymo people from time to time, and I just love being me. What can I tell you?
Do you give them hugs?
Hugs are few and far between, I guess, but they're friendly people for the most part.
I'm sure they're lovely people. So that's your gaslight. Mine, I have a tough one choosing this week because there's surprisingly so many. And I think, there's some obvious ones related to Tesla. There's some obvious one related to Morrison at NHTSA. But I think I'm going to go off book, gentlemen. I'm going to go to Donut. That's right. Donut Labs. Yeah, Donut batteries. I just decided right now to do this.
You have an update? You have an update?
I did. And this is off book. So they started testing their recharging rate on their batteries, publicly doing these public tests, which is great. They said we're doing this stuff, but I don't know if you guys remember here back in the day when they announced this, they said it's going to charge so fast we're going to slow it down. our charge because we charge so quickly. It turns out they can reach a charge of 50% in about 5 minutes, which is not them slowing it down because they were saying we're getting 100% in 5 minutes as something like that. Don't quote me on this.
So if they're getting 5 minutes now to 50%, then
They're
they did
halfway
slow it
there.
down, right?
They did slow it down. You're right.
Right.
There you go.
So where's your gaslight now?
It's still,
you're clearly not winning.
It's still, I never claimed to win this week. I mean, fine. I'll just jump to my backup then. My backup being Tesla.
Oh, wait. You're changing the goalposts here, Anthony.
Yeah,
Come on.
But I'm the judge and jury.
No, you're not.
But so it's March 18th right now. Donut says this battery, which we all, I think all of us hope, is a magical unicorn that comes to market. They've got 2 weeks left to deliver it according to their timeline. They're testing it. They're saying we're testing an older version of the battery for charging. They're basically trying to say that, it's a battery, not a super capacitor. Because I guess some skeptics are like, they didn't make a battery, they made a super capacitor. In my very limited understanding of electrical engineering, a capacitor is essentially a battery. But I guess the way they can hold charge is different. Capacitor is just temporary, battery is more long-term storage, and I'm looking towards Mr. Perkins to see how off I am on this.
I don't know. I haven't studied the chemistry. I don't know how they work.
But like a capacitor versus a battery, that's roughly right.
Oh, capacitor. Well, it depends on the size of the battery and the size of the capacitor.
Right.
But in general, capacitors are way faster.
Right. Okay. So that's it. And I think, I mean, I'm giving the win this week to Michael because we went in depth there on dads. And, Fred, I love the Waymo crusade. Big fan of it because they need to be called out. And I think, you've made a little dent in that the New York Times, they sent an intern to do a little bit of research and they pushed back a little bit by saying, and Waymo says in their own studies, where in the past they would just be like, according to studies.
Yeah.
And never cited that it was Waymo doing their own work.
Well, you've got to give credit to somebody who steers a very large uncooperative ship.
Right.
I mean, you got to, there's a handicap associated with telling the New York Times that they're full of, shall we say, water?
No, because you definitely don't win. That metaphor was too lame. Michael, you're the winner.
I want to go back to that article too, because not on the gaslight side of things, but on the kind of the what is Waymo supposed to do about this problem kind of thing, right? You have, we've talked about this before where folks essentially walk out in front of a driverless car, whether they're harassing women or harassing riders. There's all sorts of different reasons why it's happening, but ultimately the behavior that's causing these incidents is criminal in nature, right? If you're driving your own vehicle, you have the option of doing exactly what the Waymo vehicles are doing here, stopping, locking your doors. I mean, you could take even, riskier action by driving and potentially colliding with one of the people who is doing this harassment. That's an action that I don't think Waymo is ever going to be willing to take. To risk human life with their robo-taxi would pose a lot of problems for them. What do we want Waymo vehicles to be doing in this situation? They're not going to be able to deploy cruise missiles or pepper spray or, what is an autonomous vehicle supposed to do in this situation to protect its passengers? There's a quote at the end of the article that says, as passengers, we deserve more safety than essentially what's being provided. If someone is trying to attack us, there can't be a policy to just leave us there trapped. But I mean, I don't know what the solution is there. Do y'all have any ideas?
Well, the solution is to not operate until you can guarantee safety.
But how is an autonomous vehicle company ever going to be able to guarantee that some crackpot doesn't step off the curb in front of the car and harass the passengers?
Not my problem.
Yeah, I just don't see a way of that ever. I mean, just like a human driving a car will never be able to control whether or not that happens.
Well, they've had to create this imaginary perception of safety anyway to get any customers to use it. So, this is this is really no different, in my opinion. It's just another hazard that's associated with the autonomous operation of vehicles that they have not managed in any meaningful way. Um, if they can continue to get people to use the vehicle while signing away their rights to compensation and legal redress, you know, good for them, I guess. Good for their stockholders, but it's not something I want to participate in, not something I would endorse. You know, there's nothing inevitable about operation of unsafe autonomous vehicles on public roads.
Yeah, but see, even if say we live in a fantasy world, right, where Waymo vehicles are 100% safe, they're never having a crash. They aren't. Obviously, that's a pretend world, but that still doesn't resolve this issue of a human being stepping out in front of this autonomous vehicle, which is 100% of the time going to stop. We also in this fantasy world where they're perfect, right? I think we're somewhat blame shifting here when we put the blame on Waymo for locking the door and sitting there when there is, a criminal action taking place outside of the vehicle that there's really little Waymo could do to prevent. So I don't know. I feel like there's a fundamental problem in in this situation that I don't know if there is a good answer to other than addressing the actual criminal activity that's going on.
Yeah, I think it's looking at why it actually happens. It's because the passengers are helpless. Like I've never, when I've been in a vehicle driving it and you get people on the street harassing you, I can respond. I mean, that's the thing is I can respond by making physical gestures, by verbal gestures, by
What does that do?
no, but the thing is,
Nothing,
no,
right?
but they it ends quickly. Like you can do that, and people, you basically honk the horn. You can honk the horn and show that, hey, I'm going to move this vehicle, and crazy person gets out of your way. I think the problem with the Waymo is that there's no one there except for somebody in a call center in the Philippines who can do anything. Like that's the thing, and maybe that's the attraction to people who have sociopathic tendencies to be like, I'm gonna harass this vehicle because of something. I I think it's finding what's that root cause that people do this. Like why would you do that? I don't know.
Well, there's a lot of I mean, there could be any number of reasons. There could be mental health reasons. They could be
Sure.
just, this person's off their rocker, they're on drugs. I mean, there could be a dozen different reasons why it happens. It's just that I don't think there is really a good mechanism for Waymo to determine how it should respond here. Do you want the robo taxis to start honking and moving forward slowly, potentially risking a collision with this person that's harassing the vehicle or group of people that's harassing the vehicle? That's a tough question there. I mean, I wish I don't think we have the answers for that yet, and I don't know that we have the capabilities to address the criminal behavior behind it fully. I think we can expect this to continue happening. And so far, from all the cases we've seen, right, there haven't been any situations where the vehicle has been breached and the passengers have been injured, as far as I know. That certainly remains a possibility. But even in that circumstance, you could see the same thing happen, to a car that's not self-driving. So I don't know I don't know what the answer is, or if this is even really a truly a large as an issue that can be addressed.
It's a psychological thing because you're exterior to the vehicle and you realize I'm in control of the vehicle, not the person inside, because I can stop the sensors. It's Michael, you're right. I don't know. And maybe it's something over time where these things become more ubiquitous that people just start to ignore them.
I think it's likely to go in the opposite direction because the people who are inclined to do this are finding that it's consequence free and it's great fun. And, they're just going to, in my opinion, likely to keep on doing it. In fact, even doing it worse. I mean, look at all these stupid TikTok challenges that propagate, right? This is a natural TikTok challenge to propagate around the world if the Waymos go around the world. And Kids especially do stupid things. That's how kids are defined, I think. But there's
That was a great Bill Cosby show.
but I think you put your finger on it, Michael. What the hell can you really do if you pass severe laws? You're going to tie up the cops and the courts, and the courts are already being, at least federal courts, being inundated by immigration problems right now, and the backlogs run to years and years and years with all of this, deportation that's going on. So you're not going to solve this problem by further burdening the courts and restricting their authority. I don't know. Another good reason to avoid Waymo, I think.
Well, okay, let's move. We did a pretty good deep dive on this. Let's move on to another autonomous vehicle company, or two companies. Let's talk autonomous trucks. Yes, we've talked about this before, but there's more and more of these coming on the road. I think only in Texas, it looks like. And it's really just seems to be the Dallas to Houston run on the I-45. And you've got Aurora Innovation and the other one being Kodiak, of really pushing this stuff out there. And they're making kind of the same arguments that Waymo and makes, saying, hey, this is safer. Everything's great. We can drive. One of their arguments is, hey, we can do 1,000-mile run. You can't do that with a human. Why can't you do that with a human? Because people need brakes. They need this. I wasn't aware that 18-wheelers could actually have enough fuel to do 1,000-mile run without refueling.
Oh, yeah.
How far can they go? I mean, I figured they got
a full. That's one of the things I think we've brought up in the context of Tesla's electric semi, is that it has, compared to your average diesel vehicle, it has a very limited range.
And it's carrying potato chips.
It has a much more limited range than a diesel, and it has much more weight in its powertrain than the diesel. So that's kind of some of the concerns about its ability to scale.
So this is an article from the New York Times titled "Driverless Big Rigs Are Coming to American Highways and Soon." So the takeaway, my takeaway from the article is it talks about they still have an issue with phantom braking. And this is where a big rig, just like we've seen in passenger vehicles, even before AVs, where the brakes just apply automatically. Now, if in your family sedan or SUV, the issue is dangerous, but a lot less dangerous than if you're hauling a big rig, because that phantom braking event is much more dramatic because of something called physics. Now, I don't know if you believe in physics or not, or momentum or things of that nature, but if you do, I think you can see that this is a lot more dangerous. The trucking companies are trying to say, well, we have LiDAR as well, and that will reduce. Thankfully, they're not being dishonest. They're not pulling some PR thing. They're saying, yeah, it won't eliminate phantom braking, but it will greatly reduce. And they're probably right on this, but there's still no way to solve this problem with these autonomous trucks. So 2 questions, gentlemen. Actually, 1 question. Are these actually moving? Is there other states besides this one corridor in Texas that is ready to start deploying these things?
Well, I've read they're driving to Phoenix.
Oh.
So if that's true, then they'd be going through New Mexico and Arizona, but I can't come up with a corroborating study.
I think we expected the driverless semis to move and to be successful a little quicker than the autonomous vehicles that are operating in cities, because driverless trucks were essentially being seen as something that's going to operate on interstates, not inside of cities. They were talking about it as a way to move products from point A to point B, essentially in kind of moving it to zones outside of cities, and then the final delivery would take place with the human driver, so that these autonomous vehicles were essentially operating in what is ultimately one of the safest per mile environments for driving in America, which is on interstate highways or on divided highways. So I'm not surprised to see this industry continue to grow and to add rides. However, they still have a long way to go. we haven't seen them operate. We're not sure how well they operate in bad weather conditions, how they might be able to scale to other areas of the country. There's certainly a lot of concerns around this technology, because when something does go wrong, as pointed out by Missy Cummings in the article, you're talking about a lot more weight and bigger sizes and weights that are going to put surrounding vehicles at greater danger. So, you know, that's where we are. They're certainly expanding in Texas, and Aurora appears to be set to expand dramatically in the next year. We know they started doing some, rides without safety drivers last year, I think it was, and then quickly stopped that because the manufacturer of their trucks, Packer, disagreed with their approach. We're assuming that was for liability reasons, even though I don't believe Packer was willing to comment on that situation for this article.
Yeah, and from the article, it's talking about they're doing one of these companies doing a run of refrigerated goods from Dallas to Phoenix, or Fort Worth to Phoenix, somewhere Texas to Arizona. And you're right, Fred. None of these articles have still touched on that last mile problem. They just kind of say, hey, at this small part, a human driver is going to get involved. Maybe this just might be too in the weeds, but I still don't understand how that handover happens. Are these things pulling on the side of the freeway and there's a guy there waving a flag?
They're like pulling into stations essentially outside of major cities. So they make the bulk of the distance traveled is on the interstate, but it's simply the last few miles into and out of cities where you would see the human drivers operate them.
Now, is that true, or is that just the logical assumption you're making?
I believe, I don't know. We could check Kodiak and Aurora's operations, but I believe that's how their business model was initially proposed.
Because that's always the thing that seems to be, no one really talks about that. And that's always the question I've had and been too lazy to search.
Yeah. And they say, we're operating on, they say they're operating on this interstate, and it doesn't have any allusion to operating, inside the city and actually making the final delivery. So,
well, I'm sure they will in time.
Assumption. Yeah, I think in time, that's something that they're certainly going to consider. I just don't know that they're quite ready to take on the challenge of urban driving with a semi, which I think we all know is not easy at all.
I think one of the things that's not being discussed at all is the proclivity, or that's not the right word, but the likelihood of criminal behavior. Hijacking trucks is fairly common, I guess, and perhaps it used to be more common, but like these people in San Francisco with the Waymos, all you need to do to stop one of these vehicles is stop in front of it. So, you're in the middle of nowhere, a car pulls up in front of you and slows down gradually, the truck slows down gradually. If you're a criminal, this is a best case situation. You don't even have to confront the human being. You detach the load and go on your way. And, they can switch loads in just a couple of minutes. And I don't know how they're going to solve that problem at all. Seems like a real option for criminal behavior.
Now, Fred, on this podcast, you've admitted numerous times to a number of crimes you've committed. Is this foreshadowing for a future career?
Let me consult my attorney on that.
Okay. I don't know why they just don't have the driver just sleep in the cab during these things and they can just wake up and then you always have a human there. Anyway, doesn't matter. Related to this, before we jump into the Tau, is an article from IIHS. And this is something I didn't know. This one is titled, "Let's Prioritize Safety in the Vehicles That Power Our Economy." And I'm going to quote from it. "Many government safety standards that apply to passenger vehicles don't apply to commercial vehicles, which means they often lack basic features like airbags. There are also no requirements for automatic emergency braking or other advanced driver assistance systems. These systems are particularly important when you consider that most people who die in truck crashes are other road users." Now, I imagine Kodak and Aurora, they have, since it's a full ADS system, it's automated, they have AEB and things like that built into it. But you're telling me when I'm going down the highway and there's some large Peterbilt next to me, they don't have requirements for airbags for the safety of their own drivers, or they don't have automatic emergency braking required? Like automatic emergency braking would be the one that I'd want, because I'm one of the few road users that knows when to cross in front of an 18-wheeler, I want to see the entire front end of it in my rearview mirror. Because everyone else just tries to jump right in front of it and give these poor guys heart attacks and cows.
Yeah, NHTSA did the automatic emergency braking rule and completed it. Gosh, almost 2 years ago at this point, and it's still being held up, but it only applies to passenger vehicles, which are, essentially vehicles up, a simplified way of explaining it, vehicles up to 10,000 pounds. That's going to be cars and light truck categories. But that doesn't touch, a lot of like the heavy duty pickups that weigh more than 10,000 pounds, a lot of the delivery vans, anything larger that doesn't qualify as a passenger vehicle. The AEB rules that NHTSA enacted during 2024, and which we're still waiting on, don't apply to those vehicles. The that issue was supposed to be taken up by, I believe, the Federal Highway Administration, or the where there's a separate rulemaking that was ongoing that didn't come out, related to heavy truck automatic emergency braking. So that's something we're still waiting on in that area. And even then, it was a lift just to get them to consider expanding AEB not only to the trucks, but also to the all sorts of delivery vehicles and vans and, everything operating in our neighborhoods. Getting pedestrian automatic emergency braking on those and regular automatic emergency braking on those vehicles is going to be critical to ultimately preventing a lot of the deaths and injuries on our road that occur in rear collisions and in that type of situation. So that's kind of the state of play right now. There are no requirements there for AEB. Luckily, a lot of the large diesel manufacturers, I think, are incorporating automatic emergency braking into their trucks. However, without minimum safety standards to ensure consistent and effective operation there, it's difficult to know just how well those operations are going.
I always feel concerned whenever I see a FedEx or UPS truck, because the inside for the driver just looks like a death trap. Like those side doors being open. Thankfully I see them wearing seatbelts, but I didn't know they might not have an airbag. And with that, It is time for the Tao of Perkins. Look at that. I switched it up a little bit.
Good morning, gentle persons. So there's an article in Atlantic this week, title of which is "My Tesla was driving itself perfectly until it crashed." Now, for those who are not familiar with Tesla, they are using artificial intelligence to drive the car, except when it's in a critical condition, and they switch it off so that you, the driver, are legally responsible for whatever happens. Now, this article is written by Sean Dong, and it says here, quoting, "I used to run the self-driving car division at Uber, trying to build a future in which technology protects us from accidents." Close quote. Noble ambition.
Just a quick correction. The article is from Rafi Krikorian. Sean Dong illustrated it.
I beg your pardon. I was reading the wrong line.
Yeah.
Thank you for that, Michael. So it's a longish article, and of course, can't read the whole thing here, but I'll get a few of the high points here. Quoting again, "My car is full self-driving mode." I remember that was a Tesla. "Logged flawless miles for 3 years, but when the accident happened, it was my name on the accident on the insurance report." Close quote. So what Tesla did is automatically drove him into his own personally responsible disaster, nearly killing himself and his children as they ran into a wall during a turn that they had apparently navigated many times before. And he says, for now, the legal principle is simple. You're responsible. Well, that's okay if you're in a position where you can be responsible. But he goes on to say, Tesla's description of self-driving on its website warns, do not become complacent. And I didn't think I was. But it's impossible, basically, to be a fully vigilant person and also monitor a nearly autonomous system. It goes on to say, monitoring a nearly perfect system is boring. Boredom leads to mind wandering. Drivers need 5 to 8 seconds to mentally re-engage after an automated driving system gives control back. But emergencies can unfold much faster than that. The driver's physical reaction might be instantaneous, grabbing the wheel, hitting the brake, but the mental part, rebuilding context, recognizing what's wrong, deciding what to do, that takes time your brain doesn't have. So the point here is, with an automatic system that's almost perfect, you're going to get bored to tears. And he says, in his experience, AI is inherently hazardous. Quoting again, cars train us mile by mile. AI trains us week by week. In week 1, you read a chatbot's output carefully. By week 3, you're copying and pasting without reading. Well, the same thing is, close quote, same thing is true for the cars, right? You start off slowly, you're very vigilant, you are suspicious of the car's behavior when it's under AI. Soon you relax. And soon you relax beyond the limits of where you should relax. Now, airplane systems with automatic controls have built-in tests and tasks that they give to the pilots to make sure that they remain engaged. There's nothing like that built into the AI that's governing cars right now, particularly not the Teslas. The Waymo cars are designed to not be driven by a human being, so they don't presume that there's any human being who's going to take over. In some situations, a human being needs to take over, such as we talked about earlier. But for the Tesla and things that are called the SAE Level 2 cars, if they're relying upon nearly perfect, but still imperfect AI systems, you are in a world of hurt because you will get used to the system. You will become overly reliant on them. Your attention will wander, and you're going to end up in a bad place, more than likely. So I encourage people to read this article. It's in the current version of Atlantic, Michael?
Yep. Yeah, that's the April.
And we'll have the reference on our website. But the AI, embedded AI, as Phil Kolkman would tell you and has written a book about it, is inherently hazardous simply because it's a human characteristic to not pay attention to something you feel you don't have to pay attention to. And that's exactly what AI is all about. But it's imperfect. And when you buy AI, you assume it's going to be perfect because that's why you bought it, right? Doing something for you. But there are some real hidden problems in there. And again, there are a lot of inherent problems in any vehicle that is being driven by a computer that don't exist for human-driven vehicles. And these are not cataloged very well. They're not thought about much, certainly by our current regulators. But you as a consumer really need to pay attention to this because it has life and death consequences. That's it for today.
Yeah. And I'll add to that because I don't know if Fred mentioned this, but maybe I missed it. The writer of that article used to be the head of the self-driving operations at Uber. So it's not like they just fell off the turnip truck and hopped into a Tesla.
They're not like just some neuroscientist or neurosurgeon who just like, I've got an opinion about this stuff. My favorite line from this article, because it's a really good article, is basically just summing up what Fred just said. Psychologists call this the vigilance decrement. Or monitoring a system, a nearly perfect system, is boring. It's great. I love it.
I think we could all understand how that happens.
Yeah, I'm talking to you, Chernobyl. Anyway, with that, let's jump into some recalls. First up, Toyota. Whoa, big recall. 550,007 vehicles. The 2021 to 2024 Highlander Hybrid. The same thing without hybrid. The subject vehicles are equipped with second row seats that use recliner back seats. They're going to unlock, and the back angle adjustment, and it won't come into place, and force balance something with a spring. The back seats are just installed incorrectly and they're going to cause more injury in a crash. How's that? There you go.
That's a really short way of putting it. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I think this is the one where the seat backs didn't lock properly into
Exactly.
place.
The locking spring and return spring during design
reclining.
change. Yeah.
And as we've talked about many times here, having instability or a failed lock or any kind of problem on your seat in a crash is a very, very bad thing to have, since a lot of the safety that's provided to your body in a crash is designed starting with the seat. So it's incredibly important that seats be in the position they're expected to be in a crash and not in an unlocked position.
Next up, Kia. 14,870 vehicles. The 2027 Telluride, 2026 K4. This is an improperly manufactured rear center seatbelt anchor buckle. There's difficulty buckling the seatbelt anchor buckle. And I assume that's just clicking in the seatbelt into the receptacle, right?
I think it may be also in these situations we see people who think that the vehicle is buckled and it turns out that it's not.
They don't hear the click?
Yeah, there's a couple things that could be going on here. It's not, it says it may not latch properly, which kind of implies that the passenger or driver thinks they've latched the seatbelt buckle properly, but it is actually not latched, and then a collision, it comes free and does not protect the occupant.
Oh no. Last one, Volkswagen, 48,165 vehicles. The 2025 or 2026 Volkswagen Jetta. The transmission ground wire may not have been connected during production. If the ground wire is not connected, there will be an open electrical circuit.
Yes.
It makes me remember as a child, we had to test 9-volt batteries. It's still good. And you'd lick it.
Yeah, you put it on your tongue and you felt that little buzz.
It was good.
That is an uncomfortable feeling. Yeah. However, not nearly as uncomfortable as, having your vehicle catch on fire because of the fact that they didn't ground the transmission's electrical system. It looks like they're going to be fixing this in early May, so owners can look out for that.
Okay, and with that, we'd like to give a big round of applause to Ford for not making it into the recalls this week. Good job, Ford.
Hey, I also want to mention, for anybody who thinks I may have some particular competence, that for a short time, while I was in college, they were selling 100-volt DC batteries that you could put into a lantern.
Yeah.
And I'd done the 9-volt trick. So I thought, I wonder what would happen with the 100-volt battery.
God.
But I'm smart, right? So I didn't use my tongue, mainly because the terminal's too far apart. But I have big hands, and so I could lick my finger and my thumb and short out the battery terminals to see if it really was 100 volts. It was. It was a memorable moment.
Wow.
Anyhow,
that is stupid.
Yeah. You're a dummy.
Like I said, I just wanted to calibrate people's understanding of my intellectual capability here.
Did your fingernails melt off or blacken?
No.
How much acid were you on?
Very, very, very brief shock. But actually, Thomas Edison got into a ruckus with Tesla and Westinghouse way back when, because he was a advocate for DC power.
Right.
And he thought AC power would kill everybody. So it was very difficult to kill somebody using DC. You can give them a hell of a shock, but difficult to kill somebody. So I experimentally verified that. But the AC is where, never mind, I digress. Thank you for listening, folks.
Till next week, and you can tune into Fred's other podcast, Felonies and Fire Starting. I don't know.
Yeah. Human crash test dummy, Fred Perkins.
Thanks, listeners. We'll be back next week.
Everyone.
Bye.
For more information, visit www.autosafety.org.